and good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. Tonight, we're going to put the spotlight on an issue that directly concerns each and every single viewer of the urban debate. The salaried class, the middle class, the Aam Aadmi. Viewers, today, we're going to talk about the challenges that somebody, especially a salaried family living in our towns and cities, faces, and how this challenge is getting bigger and bigger. The jobs outlook is extremely bleak. Our salary hikes outlook is extremely bleak. Even if you want to change jobs and there are some available, they're perhaps not those of your choice. Add to this stress and a constant stress that you will have on your minds about your employment. There hasn't been any significant tax relief in the last budget, or even before that. So while many were hoping that post the pandemic, the government will have some relief for them, that didn't come through. Add to that the problem of fuel prices. Fuel prices are now, in some parts of our country, for petrol reaching 100 rupees per litre. At any other time, in any other decade of our country, anything above 90 would have created protests on streets. While we are better off in terms of our living conditions largely, still, this is something that pinches everybody's wallet. In COVID times, there is obviously a reluctance to use public transport. There is a fear of COVID infection, which means that your travel becomes more expensive unless your company is providing you travel, because obviously you will have to shell a lot more for private cabs, for these cab aggregator services that are available. If you're one of those who has to take air travel for whatever reasons, well, the prices of domestic airfares are also set to go up because the government has now increased the minimum and the maximum cap that they had put, simply because the crude prices are on the rise, fuel prices are on the rise, and so are the airfares. And when all of this moves up, so does the prices of a lot of the products that you use. So in the next few months, if the fuel and the crude prices don't come down, several other of the products that you use will begin to get more and more expensive. There is a growing sense that, yes, while it is understandable that a segment of our country needs the government support and the welfare, and a segment of our country is just getting richer and richer, it is this category which is in the middle that everybody seems to have forgotten. And these honest taxpayers, whatever the number be, 4 to 6 crore of honest taxpayers, are the ones who are having to bear the brunt of it at every level. And I don't just mean income tax. I mean all those additional cess, all those additional duties and taxes that are there on every service and product that you use. And I'm going to give you certain examples as we go along. So the big question that I'm asking is, are we squeezing this class a little too much? Are we putting too much expectation on building the nation from this class whose taxes fill up the government coffers, and that money is essentially then often used simply for vote bank politics? Let's say good evening to the panelists who are joining us. Anand Gurumurthy, spokesperson for the BJP, Anand Madhav, spokesperson for the Congress Party, Dr. Ajay Dua, former Commerce Secretary, and Mr. R. Srinivasan, senior journalist, joining me this evening. Our phone lines are also open, and I want all of you to participate in it. I want to know what you think and what you feel is the right amount that you're willing to contribute towards nation building via taxes and cess and service charge and everything else. And if you believe some relief is required. So let me straight away go to our panelists, and I want to start off with Mr. Srinivasan. Mr. Srinivasan, it's not to say that a direct tax cut is required right away for the income taxpayers. But when we look at the larger picture, there is very little coming our way, even in terms of great education infrastructure, great health infrastructure, great road infrastructure. None of that seems to be coming from the other end. What is your view?
Well, basically, the middle class has always been milked and will continue to be milked to fund whatever is the political program of the government of the day in power. In real terms, it's a class which essentially, works, pays taxes, and buys all those goods and services which help keep the economy not only ticking but growing. So, who are the people who buy cars and motorcycles and flat panel TVs and computers and smartphones and go out and eat in restaurants, take holidays? It's the bulk of that comes from the middle class, and the middle class has got absolutely no relief, not just in this budget, but not since 2014. When was that was the last that the middle class got a small tax break and actually got a little bit of extra, got to keep a little bit more of the money that they've already earned. So there is nothing in the budget for the middle class, and I don't think there has been anything in the budget for the middle class for several years now.
Yes, and in the light of that fact, and while the government in fact is also in a way highlighting this aspect that look, we've not even done anything to the tax structure because we believe you shouldn't constantly be playing around with the tax structure, but that's just the income tax. Anand Gurumurthy, then comes the additional cess and additional taxes that you seek from us. And that becomes a problem. We are looking at shelling out 95 rupees, 100 rupees per litre for petrol. And if we decide to fly, then a lot more.
Yeah, Mr. Srinivasan told a very good point. It's all citizens, among all citizens, we the middle class or the citizens, we end up paying more for everything, for every commodity. But let's understand this from the perspective of how many pay the tax. Okay, it's only 8% file and 6% pay up something in direct taxes bracket. So indirect taxes is the only form of revenue, and during these times, every GST after GST implementation, if you see, only in excise and petrol also comes under that. That is the only way the state government gets their money. So they are not ready to lose that part of this thing, and whatever extra they have to balance out, they are balancing out there. And the other option left is to transfer the debt to future, which is something which we don't want to do. Let's be very clear in this. It should not be a burden today. At the same time, burdening the future is not good, because if you see the UPA government that was before us, they put a big oil bonds on our head and they went away. After 2014, the oil bonds have been somehow managed. So all this is unnecessarily debt on the future. So we don't want to give it to the next government or to the next generation. The debt that what we have to clear it today. So it's better to rationalize and go ahead. And this way, the structure, direct tax structures have been kept the same. And at the same time, management of whatever can be managed at whatever level is being managed. So government is doing whatever best it can do. And if there is some change in fuel listing in the international market, some relief there, then it might get transferred in the future. But right now, with the COVID crisis and almost 2 quarters, we having negative growth rate. There is no other option, and I think this is what is rationally correct. And at this point
so you do agree that it is the middle class that takes the larger burden, and that is the way to go forward, and that's your view.
I agree with the point that it is the taxpayer and it is the middle class which is taking the burden.
Yeah.
Because on a day-to-day basis, we are the ones who daily travel to office, as you said, and we are not able to commute in public transport because of the COVID fear. And it is going on. But is it going to go on in the future? No. It is going to rationalize in the coming days. And coming to the point, okay, there is no disagreement that middle class is the one, entrepreneurs within the middle class are the ones who build this country.
I'm just curious. I'm just curious when you say that the crude prices are going up internationally, so we can't help it. When the crude prices go down, we can't help it even then. Because when the crude prices, effectively, my bracket of movement is literally from 85 to 100. And hopefully not beyond that, when the price of a barrel of crude oil goes from $40 to $110. Now, how's that fair? Or how is that a reason? Then don't give us the reason that it's about international prices.
No. I'm not giving a reason that it's about international prices. Because of the international prices, the prices are high. Because today it's the internet world. I'm not going to come and tell something which people can't search on Google or something like that. Okay. Let's be very clear, honest here. It is because of whatever we saw since the last 1 year. and it is being rationalized. Like the indirect tax collection has to happen. Otherwise, there is no other way of source of income for the government to run the show. Okay, and at the same time, I clearly mentioned in the future, if there is further fuel prices come down in the international market, then there might be relief for us. Okay, it's not something which I'm promising may happen. Then second thing, I very clearly told, I think you missed that point. Okay, you did not hear to that point, or you don't want to hear to that point. That is with respect, pushing the debt to the future. That we don't want to do.
No, I got that point, and I am totally on board with you on that point. I don't think the policy that your predecessor governments had about just piling up the debt and rolling it over and again and then collecting tax only to be able to repay your debt and not use it for nation building, I don't think that's good economics. I agree with you there. I disagree with you when you say this is the only way to bring in money for the government, and I think the governments need to get a little bit more innovative. Anand Gurumurthy, I will come back to you. Let me go across to two of our other panelists and to Dr. Ajay Dua first. Dr. Ajay Dua, is this the only way left, that when the economy, jobs outlook is slow, bleak, we continue to hike prices for everything else simply to suck more money out of these 6 crore taxpayers?
Well, the government, I'm sure, had weighed various options and then it settled for this one. But as one knows, there are several routes economists can suggest, and each one of these can have a fair amount of validity. One I would like to suggest is that there was no reason for the government to, at this point of time.
Dr. Ajay Dua, I think there is a problem with your line. We're unable to get your audio through, and I think the feed has also frozen. We're going to try and fix that and get back to him. Anand Madhab, good evening to you. Now, while I don't think your government had great policies when it comes to balancing the act, but you clearly believe that the final pinch shouldn't just go to one side.
Yeah, in fact, in the name of rationalization of the things, the middle class and the lower middle class is feeling the same. This budget has completely ignored the middle class in the hour of when they need it. We all know that there is a time of the COVID, and it's under this COVID, everyone is under big pressure, and middle class is suffering more and more. We all know that about the petrol price which we are discussing today, and you have already mentioned that it has reached in a city like Mumbai is 100 rupees per liter the petrol, and you see the jump. Jump was it's a 258% plus in the excise duty of the petrol and 820% hike in the diesel excise duty. So why is so? If the excise duty can be reduced, when the international market is not showing this, international market, there is a reduction in the barrel price per barrel price. We also need to understand that this price hike in the airfare, which has gone to 30%. So when government came into the power, they promised that the people in the sleeper can travel in by the air. And what is happening today? So, in the name of the so-called development, the middle class is being cheated. They are paying the taxes every corner. They are paying the double taxes. First, they are paying the income taxes, and apart from that, they are also paying the taxes whenever they go to buy anything, right from the.
No, so what is your solution? The government says we have to get the money from somewhere. What's your solution to that?
Please come again.
What is the solution that your party has when the economy is out, the tax collections are low, the government says they need the money from somewhere? So they are asking the middle class.
When you have the money to say wave off the money of the big pockets, why can't you give that money to the poor people, to the middle class people? Why can't you give the reduction to the middle class people? You have the money, you have waved off a lot of money to the big tycoons, the corporates, and at one hand you are waiving off the loans of the tycoons and the big corporates, and at the other hand you are increasing the taxes and not giving any relief to the middle class. You must have seen the reports that the job loss during this pandemic. What is happening to the middle class? They are also not in a position because they cannot pull the rickshaw at the same time. They cannot go. They don't have any job. So they feel helpless. They are at the verge of hunger, unemployment, and also going for the suicide. You know the condition of the middle class right at the moment.
Okay, Anand Gurumurthy wanted to respond to that.
Yeah. See, basically, Congress always makes such points, okay? They don't have any solution. They say that, some loan is waived off and, someone is being shown favoritism. Only that happened in the Congress rule, okay? But this is like, they keep telling what they had done. But actual conditions are something which actual conditions the country is facing. And this is something which we are, during recession times of 2008, our country faced similar problems. What they did? They just transferred the debt to the future generations. That's it. Future generations. That we are paying it. We are still paying the things back to other, whatever debts that piled upon us in the form of oil bonds and other things with so many countries. Narendra Modi government had to struggle through, in the first this thing to manage the financials and shape it up properly.
No,
And
so
during the pandemic stage, if we are seeing out of pocket expenses a little bit more, everybody is understanding this, especially the middle class. They are the backbone of this country and they understand it very well. Okay, otherwise they would not have supported our government time and again and shown the same kind of support.
yeah, but that doesn't mean you
this
take them
doesn't
for
mean
a
that
ride and you squeeze them,
that-
them until they die out.
I know what you're coming to. But let me tell you very clearly, this doesn't mean that we take them lightly. We have it in the heart and we know that this is the process and this is the process by which we don't want to transfer the debt to future generations.
Okay, Mr.
And at the
Gurumurthy, I
same
take your
time-
point on the debt, but let's just, again, we can get innovative with the way we manage our finances. I think every household in India does that. Dr. Ajay Dua is back with us. Let me get in a comment from him and I'll come back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, Tanvi, I am very clear that the government has tried out one particular way of handling this matter. Probably it may or may not work, but it could have easily settled for greater stimulus in the during the pandemic, and right now emphasize that rather than looking at settling the dues of Fertilizer Corporation of India, of the Food Corporation of India, as well as of the fertilizer manufacturers. A large amount has been given to them in this quarter and is earmarked to be given to them next year. That is what is accounting for 9.5% of the fiscal deficit this year and 6.8 next year. This was not a time to be able to settle from a tax receipt which is still not buoyant. We are still working. Last year we were next year we are planning only 2018-19. We are 14% nominal growth and a real growth of 10%. So all those presumptions have forced the government's hand and the way that we will first settle the previous debt. And obviously, if you borrow if your deficit is 9.5, you are going to be borrowing far more from the market to fund it. And that means you are committing your future resources also only to interest payment.
Yeah.
52% of the budget next year, Tanvi,
Is only interest
going to be earmarked only for interest payment. I would have liked to see much gradual settlement of previous dues and instead worrying about tax reliefs to the people at the bottom as well as particularly the middle class who is bearing the brunt of all the indirect taxes. Not just the petrol cess, which certainly is huge, but also the import duties which have been hiked up, the excise duties which have been hiked up. Your Atmanirbhar program, certainly it is good, but if it means raising protectionism, then you are killing growth for the future. Exports are not building up. You are also
I get the point you're making, Mr. Dua, and I'm sorry, we're going to try and see if we can get a better line with you. But I got the first point that you made. Anand Gurumurthy wants to respond, and then I have a question for Mr. Srinivasan, and we also have some viewers waiting for us. Yeah, Anand.
Yeah, so one thing, he talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the packages that were given. Those were the stimulus, and that was clearly done during the COVID times, during this thing. And in the finance minister's speech this year also, he has talked about these stimulus. And also at the same time, at the bottom of the chart, okay, the poor and the PDS system that supports the poor with food grains and other things have been taken care. So there is you can say that it may not be a direct financial stimulus, but definitely a kind of security, food security stimulus. So this way the government has done whatever it had to do. But when it comes to the, managing the tax revenues, okay, we have, I mean, before 2014 itself, the borrowings were very high, and as the previous panelist, who's a former bureaucrat also, he told it very clearly. See, why we are paying so much of interest? It's not the Narendra Modi government that borrowed. See, we are paying this because of all those, debt that was transferred by keeping us in dark.
Yes, but I'm sorry, we are going around in circles, Anand, and I'm going to now interject. Find better ways of raising money. You keep telling us how the markets are at an all-time high and everything is okay with our economy and it's doing great and investors have so much confidence. Why didn't the government decide to sell off some of its stake in so many companies and raise some money? You could have very well sold some of the government-owned stake in these companies, raise some money, find better ways of raising money, tax the super rich people if you need to, rather than putting the entire burden on this class, because unlike the super rich, unlike the big corporates, who will raise hell if you look at them, who will raise hell if you put any tax on them or don't give them a tax relief, as we saw in the last budget. The only class that doesn't say anything is the middle class, and so you tax them. I understand when you have to, 1 minute please, let me finish my point. I understand when you have to help out the poor and the vulnerable, and those welfare schemes are much welcome. I don't understand when your government feels so scared of the signals that the stock markets and the big corporates are sending you that you just go back on all of your promises and give them tax relief. Okay. Why don't you tax them?
Would you let me answer? Okay, first of all, it was a very beautiful thing what you gave. But let me tell you one thing. When you are telling, let us tax the rich more, this was already tried in our country in the 1980s during the Indira Gandhi government. Okay, and what happened then? That time, things started flowing out of our country. All the assets were liquefied and cash started moving out of our country. That's what happens in most of the world economies when, the people who are investing and reinvesting are not given enough freedom. And that's what even the bureaucrat was telling. Okay, then the Atmanirbhar Bharat must continue without, any kind of protectionism. And there's no protectionism as such. I don't know why he thinks that there is some kind of protectionism associated with it. No, nothing like that. Okay. Then, secondly, you told about the share market. In fact, I have time and again talked about the goodness of the share market in 2018 and 19. And now, what share market we are seeing is because of certain, certain policies of government of India, even during the COVID period, and many investors from outside are seeing better prospects in India.
So why did you sell government stake in companies?
If you don't let me complete, I will not be able to, complete.
Why did you sell government stake in the companies in this great bull market run that we saw?
What did you say?
Why is the government not selling the stake it owns in so many large conglomerates? You keep telling us about divestment. You don't sell your shares when the market is on the up movement.
Not only selling of stakes. Even what is it? They had even mentioned about our shares in many other things. Disinvestment plan. The disinvestment plan was clearly discussed in the budget also.
Yes.
What more has to be
told? Because it's discussed in the budget, Mr. Gurumurthy, it's never followed up and the targets are never met. That's exactly the point I'm making. Allow me, please, to take this point. And Mr. Srinivasan, to you I ask this question because it boils down to we don't have any options. We need the money, hence more taxes and more duties on fuel. Now, the center will put those taxes, the state will increase its own taxes. I mean, it's ridiculous if you look at the structure of the fuel pricing that we have in our country. Now, what's the solution? Can we look at some innovative ways of raising money that doesn't just focus on one segment?
I think there are plenty of options available. First of all, I would like to dispel the fallacy that a reduction in taxes actually leads to reduced revenue for the government. A reduction in taxes, if if done right, can actually lead to higher revenues because consumption goes up. Let me give you a good example. The transformation in urban housing, the Indian real estate boom started after a home buyer was given a tax break. You were given a 1 lakh rupee concession on principal and 50,000 rupees on interest. And that led to the massive construction boom which transformed urban skylines across the country. And the government ended up making much more money over time than what it gave away by giving the tax break on purchasing a house for a middle class buyer. So it's a fallacy that if you cut some rates, you will lose revenue. It's not. Consumption can go up and you can get more money. Let me make a quick case for why you could have looked at a little bit of a break for the middle class. What happened last year? During the pandemic year, every single Indian household, working household, middle class household, suffered income reduction. It suffered this either by the loss of job of a breadwinner or a pay cut for those who managed to retain their jobs. That, in very few cases, some of the places the pay cuts are being rolled back, but what was cut has gone forever. That income has been lost forever. Last year, they suffered a serious reduction in income that was not taken into account by the finance minister. Now, let me come to your question about, are there other ways to increase, revenues? Yes, there are. You pointed out one yourself, which is divestment. Last year's budget had a divestment target of 22 lakh crore rupees. I think they actually achieved 18,000 crores. This year's target is reduced. In a year when they are they are saying that, look, we'll find more money and we don't want to pass debt on to future generations. What they've actually done is to push up the government deficit sharply. They didn't have an option, I agree. But look at what is going to happen going forward. The glide path to reducing the deficit is now for the center is 5 years. And even then, it will be at 4.5% of GDP, which is 1.5% more than the 3% which was mandated by law to have been achieved by 2021 this year. So, one, you are transferring debt to the future. Two, you are not looking at additional ways of raising money. Three, and very important, you're not reducing the size of government at all. Where is the government spending the money? I mean, barely 1/3 goes towards productive expenditures. The rest of it is on servicing debt and for paying salaries and pensions. And has the government made any attempt to actually address the size of its own expenditure? No, it has not. So that is another way where you can raise some real revenue. Then the tax on say capital markets. I'm not talking about taxing everything, but the capital market. The Sensex doubled in the pandemic year. A lot of people made a lot of money, and you could have had a graded capital gains tax so that if you made more than say 15 lakhs a year, as capital gains, and then instead of 10%, you pay more, or you pay, so, and you could have gradations on that. You could definitely have looked at different ways to structure the tax slabs. And all of this is not going to drive this thing. One of the reasons why the market is rising is that there is simply too much money chasing too few stocks. Why is there too much money chasing too few stocks? That is because, one, the Indian middle class saver is being pushed out of bank deposits, which were their favorite form of savings, because the interest rates have dropped so low that it is no longer viable to park your money in an FD, and they are searching for higher returns in the market and pushing it into mutual funds. And there are far too few stocks available for the money flowing into the mutual funds. So they're bidding up the price. Ditto for foreign money coming in. It is coming in because governments around the world have been injecting money at nearly 0% interest into the economy, into their economies, in a bid to sort of address the impact of the pandemic. And that money is looking to find higher returns and is moving around. It is coming into emerging markets like India. So, it's not as if this thing. So, if you increase a little bit of that tax, yes, you may lose a little bit, but a lot of the money is still going to come. The Indian saver is still going to look for a higher return. So that, in my view, the government has not even made a serious attempt to look at how else it could raise money. And if you
Yes.
can raise money, a penny saved is a penny
In
earned.
fact, if I may
What have
add
they done
to
about
it,
saving money?
in
What
fact,
have
if
they done
I may
about
add to it,
saving money?
Mr. Srinivasan, to the point that you made about, putting in some more taxes on your on the money you make out of capital markets, no government wants to do it because this is one segment that has the power to be heard. That has the power to create noise. When this segment doesn't like anything that is announced in the budget, they do create noise. They make it sound like the doom is right here, that the economy is going to go into a spiral, and it's all because government is taxing capital gains, and the government is forced to push back. When you talk about asking taxes on the super rich farmers, it's a vote bank politics issue. Why should farmers who've now managed to earn so much money that they have 5 luxury cars parked in their garages and acres of land, why should you not be taxing them? But we will not do it because it's a political issue. The only silent class is the middle class that doesn't make this an election issue, that doesn't get good hospitals in return, that gets pothole-ridden roads in return, that gets disastrous government schools and government hospitals in return, and they are the ones who continue to pay the taxes. It is that. Let me just give one example to our viewers. You may not realize it because the excitement of buying and owning a car is so great that we often miss the deeper calculation that goes into it. But this is actually a classic example that many experts, economists and financial journalists really use to explain a tax structure of any country. So for example, if you want to buy a car, own a car which is priced at about 15 lakh rupees. Now essentially, you will need 21.42 lakh rupees earnings. You will need to earn this much money. However time it takes you to earn this much money, you will need to earn 21.42 lakh rupees. Why? When the price is 15 lakh? Because first when you earn this money, you will end up paying an income tax on it. And so about 6.4 lakh rupees goes out as just income tax. And then you are left with that 15 lakh amount, which you then go to a showroom and you pay to the dealer. Part of which goes to the dealer, part of it goes to the company manufacturer, and a part of it goes away as taxes again. That's about 5.2 lakh rupees. This is just the amount of tax you have to pay on earning this money to buy a car worth 15 lakh. Now let's talk about when you start driving the car, when you own the car. And I'm not even going into the maintenance part of it, simply about the fuel costs. If you are looking at a car that's driven about 1 lakh kilometers, on an average by then you dispose of your car and you've driven about 80,000 kilometers or 1 lakh kilometers. So that's the benchmark that's been taken. You must earn 10.7 lakh rupees because again, first you'll have to pay income tax on it and then again you'll have to pay fuel tax on it to be able to buy some fuel to put in the car to run it for this much distance, 1 lakh kilometer, for however long it takes you to drive it around for this much distance. In all, to own a car priced 15 lakh rupees, to drive it around for 1 lakh kilometer, you would need to earn 32 lakh rupees because you will end up paying 18.78 lakh rupees just as taxes in that entire time period. This calculation is done with an assumption that your annual salary is actually 50 lakh to 1 crore rupees, a math that has been put out in today's Times of India. This gives you a sense of the taxation structure we have for the people who pay taxes in this country, which isn't even everybody. Mr. Dua is back with us. Mr. Dua, this next question I wanted to ask you was on fuel tax itself. It's become an easy habit, not just for the center, but even for the states to go on increasing these taxes, and states do it too. Perhaps that's why the opposition is not on streets that often these days, because they are doing the same thing in their own states and raising these taxes on fuel. Now, is that sound economics? Is that what's done across the world?
Not at all a sound economic basis. To continue that, the best way out was when we moved in for the GST regime. We should have also covered petrol and petrol products under GST. It is merely to appease the state government that the center didn't push it, but state governments, one, wanted the freedom to be able to have some income which is their own, so-called their own. They don't depend upon the center. And at the same time, the center probably found it very convenient to be able to levy cess, which it doesn't have to share with the states, and continue, and it doesn't go into either the divisible pool, etc. I think this is a suboptimum manner, and the sooner we bring petrol, diesel, petroleum products under the GST, only then we would be able to see what is the impact and make it worth the while for the car owners. The mathematics, the math which you gave very rightly, it works exactly in that manner. We'll see some kind of a resolution. Otherwise, on the cars itself, the duty is so high, and now on running of the cars also, if the fuel just keeps on going endlessly. Even when we had crossed the $100 mark, if you would recall, for some times in the price of petrol 2 or 3 years ago, the petrol never came to in the 90s. But now, because we haven't reduced the duties, the extra duties put by the center and the states, which happened during the pandemic when the international demand for petrol came down, crude came down, the prices fell. Now we continue to levy it at those rates, and now it's a higher rate because of $60 plus for our kind of Brent kind of crude, our basket of Brent crude. We are ending up paying this. So I'm one with you totally, Tanvi, that we need to revisit it at the earliest, and the states have to be assured that yes, there might be shortage, there might be a loss to them, but that is the only way they'll be able to keep their electorate happy and genuinely the middle class happy, which is being forced to now move from public transportation to individual transportation, all because of the need to have social distancing, etc.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, at this point, you cannot blame people for having to choose that. They have no option. So they will have to shell out that additional money. Quick comment from Anand Gurumurthy before I go across to a viewer on the phone line.
Yeah, one thing. One thing is this thing. When Mr. Srinivasan he told a lot of money is moving because of incentives given in some countries that is coming as foreign exchange and it's sitting in our share market. That is true. But if you see the amount that increased in Indian market, in the banking system, actually during the pandemic, the FDs, fixed deposits increased. It's the market being fueled from outside. But actually in India, people are still going for safe deposits. So I just wanted to make this one point because let the viewers be clear and they can search for this data anywhere.
Yeah,
and
because one never knows which way this market is going to go next. And so people who are assuming that the market is at its peak and is going to come down, they're probably going to hold on to their money in fixed deposit and enter the markets when it goes down. But apart from that, I'll come back to you, Anand.
One more point I have to add.
Okay, one more point, yeah.
The Forex. Okay, see, many people are suggesting that, the fuel price, this thing has one more impact, and that is Forex. Okay, foreign exchange has become a burden also for us because what outgoes as our fuel expenses, okay, is a very big outgo for India, and that creates a lot of fiscal deficit on our nation's budget year on year. So that also has to be taken into account by all the panelists here.
Okay, we have opened up our phone lines, and we also have people who are live tweeting to me as they watch the show and giving in their view. One viewer, in fact, just tweeted saying, well, the fuel prices will go down when elections are around the corner. People know that that's what happens in this country, and I will give you the example of how correct they are, because news has just come in right now that in Assam, the Assam government has decided to cut prices on fuel by 5 rupees. Assam is a state that goes to election this year in a few months from now, this summer. So here you go. 5 rupees is a big amount for a state to decide to cut on taxes. They've also said, by the way, that they're going to relook at some of the other additional taxes that are being levied on alcohol. So there is some relief coming in there in an election-bound state. This is how it works in this country. You will get some doles around election time. Rest of the year and rest of the time, please continue paying for stops that the government may want to give in another part of the country where there are elections. I have on the phone line with me Mr. Sanjeev calling us from Mumbai. Good evening. What would you like to say?
Good evening. See, Tanvi, right now the discussion is revolving around, right now the discussion is revolving around the additional avenues of generating revenues. But why can't we focus on prioritizing the expenditure? What was the necessity of spending 20,000 crore on Central Vista and then erecting a statue here, a statue there? That can very well wait till the normalcy returns to the country. And this is really pinching the middle class. There is a job loss on one hand, and we don't have any effective social security. Just as one has got an effective social security in, say, Europe or for the other Western countries. So it is a double whammy for the middle class. The government simply doesn't understand any damn thing. This is my question.
Okay, fair enough. It's a good question. Let me just take it across to Mr. Dua and ask him, Dr. Dua, are there ways of also prioritizing your spending? I mean, we honestly, and this may be an aberration here because we've literally cut down everything else except COVID-related expenses and emergency expenses, but otherwise as well.
Yes, absolutely. The government needs to prioritize its expenditure. Whole lot of things which the government is doing, it need not do. And a gentleman before me very rightly had mentioned, cut the size of the government. Why do you need to have so many ministries at the central government where I have worked for a long time, and when the role is of the state governments? State governments in turn need to give it away to the local governments. So I think that's one way to be going forward. And finally, why should the government be doing it at all at any tier? A lot of services can be done better, probably cheaper also. By outsiders. That's one. But Tanvi, I would just come back to saying, why couldn't we levy during this current year a COVID cess on the rich? Why couldn't we levy a temporary wealth tax? People we have enough data now that the inequalities of income and inequalities of wealth have widened during the pandemic and in no way come down. So this was assuring them that this is not forever, but we have to fund it, and we are going to be funding the capital expenditure from which you, the rich people itself, will benefit because the growth will be higher, etc., whether it's by way of capital expenditure in infrastructure or otherwise. Similarly, we've been talking and talking, but our privatization, only time it worked was during Mr. Vajpayee's government, when you had a separate department and a separate minister in Mr. Arun Shourie for this investment. It's all right. He is now facing certain consequences, questioning, etc. But I'm sure that there was nothing wrong which he did, or at least intentionally. And we need to focus on that. We want not just selling your family silver to meet the year-end deficits, but we want true sense of the word privatization, which means throughout the year you keep working. Not just fag end of the year, you're kind of hive off 5%, 6% of one company, 10% of others, and achieve nothing. And I would emphasize a final point on raising of money. The government continues to sit on huge amount of land. Whether it's the military cantonments, whether it's the public sector undertakings of the government, all of these are now prime lands in urban areas. Lots of these in metropolitan towns like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Calcutta. We are sitting on lands. Please get rid of them.
Yes.
And finally, if I could just say, the government creates money through creative manners, that is by changing the zoning restrictions. What may have been hitherto totally no development areas, that can be by a stroke of pen be brought into change of use into commercial, residential, mixed uses. All this fetches the government money. I see no reason why the government should be only looking at tax revenue, and that too, not direct taxes, but indirect taxes, which every economist, including a college student, will tell you is regressive because everybody has to bear it irrespective of his
or
Correct.
her ability to afford it.
Irrespective of his
moved-
or her ability to how much they can pay and taxes,
Yes.
everybody has to pay the same amount. There has to be a distinction, otherwise you end up looking at an economy where one side gets richer and richer, the other gets poorer, and the one in between is badly stuck and burdened with everything else that is required. Vijay Narona calling us from Pune on the phone line. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Good evening. I actually wanted to second what Srinivasan had said. Mr. Srinivasan said a few minutes ago. I am actually from a middle class, as it's mentioned, a lay person, and what do you call? I don't have any godfather or someone who donated money for me, from ancestral finance. And I'm talking from my experience of 40 years where I've been working. But it's been 40 years where I've not seen any change. All I see is one political party comes up. I'm not good into politics also, so excuse me for that. But it has been 40 years that I've been working, and when someone starts working, the thought in mind is, I have to settle down. I need to get a house, family, think of the future. And it's been 40 years where different parties have come, different politicians have come. And everywhere I've seen, one politician blaming the other politician, the other politician blaming the previous politicians. But in this 40 years, every year I think that, next year I'll get an increment.
Yes.
And I can save that increment and save something, for my future. But next year again, something happens and, there is no saving. It has been now 40 years that I've been working and I've struggled and there is no savings as such because always something goes up, taxes go up, petrol prices go up, inflation goes up, everything goes up. But end result, after 40 years of working, I'm still struggling.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And the sentiment that comes with it, Mr. Vijay, I completely agree. In fact, I have a view which is otherwise very unpopular to whoever I express it to, but I do believe that when the governments and any government helps out the industry by giving them SOPs or relief of any kind, or support of any kind to grow the economy, it must come with the condition that you take care of your employees. It shouldn't be that the industry gets a relief and a SOP from the government, especially in times when the economy is down and out, when we're hit with a pandemic, and they still end up firing people. And what is left is the money that they profit and pocket it for themselves. That is unfortunately where happens very often in our country, where the salaried employee gets to bear the brunt of it any which ways. The salaries are cut, pink slips are given, and at the end of the quarter or the end of the year, you'll still see that these companies are actually registering profits. Somewhere maybe the government needs to think of a way of linking these incentives to how they also take care of their own people and their employees. Now, one last caller before I go back to our viewers. Mr. Lal is on the phone line and he's calling us from Mohali. Good evening.
Yeah, I want to give two suggestions. Why not to broaden the direct tax base by including agriculture income, keeping some threshold, say about 7 lakhs or 10-acre land holding. And number two is to tap business owner or shop owners in all the towns. There are crores of shopkeepers or you can say small business houses. I doubt they are paying taxes. These are too much suggestions to the government.
Okay, actually, you know what? Let's take up that point and let's start with Anand Madhav on this one. Anand Madhav, why don't political parties look at the option of taxing the super rich farmers and the agri income?
Risk take if it feels that it is required. But we also need to look into the current scenario, what is happening today. We all know that we were discussing on this unemployment and the hike of the petrol prices every day. Millions of jobs lost during the early months of the pandemic. And still it is continuing. This is not my report, it is the report of CMIE. And government has not taken any steps toward that. The government has earned 20 lakhs crore rupees in last 6.5 years by increasing the excise duties on the petrol and diesel. And time has come. Now the people will start taking the loans for the fuel on petrol loans. It's just a petrol loot. And So we need to see that how it is going on, how the things are moving in this current scenario. People, Mr. Gurumurthy has talked about the debt and all that, but he should also realize the loan multiple times loan has increased on this current government, and government is under the loan which all receive, which is manifold than the UPA government. The loan was the status of loan. He can refer to the data and see. But no one is bothered about this middle class, and middle class is the sufferer from
No, but
every
so
corner.
neither is your government. Now, what about the states where your party is in power? Are you going to cut fuel taxes anywhere?
Yeah, coming in, I can't hear you.
What about the states ruled by the Congress, governed by the Congress? Why don't you cut the fuel tax, state fuel tax in Rajasthan, in Chhattisgarh, in Punjab, and give some relief to some part of this country?
It is there, and it has increased. You can see the prices of the petrol is not as high as in Delhi and the Mumbai or the Maharashtra.
Actually, you know,
The
one of
government
the
does-
first places to hit 100 rupees was a petrol pump, a petrol station itself. So you may want to go back and look at the statistics. And it's not really comparable. Delhi and Mumbai, I mean, if we had to do that, people from Mumbai will be forever crying. If you look at the difference between what Delhiites pay and what Mumbaikas have to pay for petrol or even diesel. Mr. Srinivasan, if I can come to you on this other aspect that was raised about taxing the agri income for at least, farmers above a certain level, above a certain income level and money. Why isn't that ever looked at?
Yes, I know, and I think it's become a political hot potato, and no government, I think, has the political will to address this issue. And again, it's all optics. It's not as if farmers are not paying taxes; they're paying huge amount of input taxes on everything that they use. There is GST on fuel, there's GST on fertilizer, there's GST on seeds, there's tax on electricity, on water. Everything that they use, they pay a tax. Unlike other businesses, they don't get an input tax credit. So, like a car manufacturer acquires steel from Tata Steel, steel coming out of the Tata plant is taxed at certain rate. That tax is refunded to the manufacturer because you don't put tax on tax. And that's the beauty of GST. But does the farmer get any benefit of GST? No. So I don't think these issues are, have been explained adequately to the audience. If you could look at, providing, treating agriculture actually properly as a business, and actually putting a value on the farmer's labor and his investment, and looking at a reasonable return, then you wouldn't even be having the protests which are going on right now. Because what is the core issue that the farmer is asking? What is the core question that the farmers at single border in Delhi are asking? They're asking, what is the worth of my work? What are you giving me? So that is why, the insistence on the MSP, because MSP is an assurance that they will get a fair return. MSP does not guarantee you super profits. MSP is calculated and fixed to ensure that the farmer gets a fair return after allowing for input costs. So it's not as if he's making money even with MSP. He just gets a reasonable return. And that's the question that farmers want certainty on. If you could address that, if you could, look at the overall taxation structure and see whether farmers can get input tax credits, farmers can actually gain the benefit of the subsidies which are being given out in their name. A lot of it is actually going to fertilizer manufacturers, tractor manufacturers, agricultural equipment manufacturers, and so on, other input manufacturers. And if the farmers can access credit at a reasonable cost, I think the issue of taxing farmers' income can be addressed. And like the viewer said, you can put reasonable restrictions on it to start with. Make sure that you actually touch only those who are earning a reasonable amount or above that. So you have landholding limits, which can vary from state to state, because 1 acre in Punjab is, maybe the equivalent of 15 acres of unirrigated land in Telangana. So, you can have, there are ways to address the issue, but no government has demonstrated the political will to actually address this issue. So, like reservations, this is something which will just simply carry on and will not be addressed.
Yes, I think it's a lot to do with political will as well. And thank you actually for explaining the other subsidies that are often spoken about, because, largely the population does have an understanding, oh, farmers are getting everything for free. The power, the water, the fertilizers, and everything else. And so why are we doing that while we have to bear the brunt? So I'm glad that you explained a lot of the complicated structure and the way it functions. I am completely out of time at this point, so I will have to thank all four of our panelists. It was great to have all of you here with us. Viewers, I just want to put out one fact as well. When we talk about fuel taxes, it's not just the center, it's also the states. And the states, if you see, just like the central government in the last couple of years, the states themselves have also time and again resorted to increasing their state taxes on fuel. So depending on where you live and in which part of the country you live, you're probably having to shell out a lot more than other states, unless you're in an election-bound state, in which case, like Assam, you will probably get some benefits. All governments, state or center, Congress or BJP or any other party, are resorting to these tactics of increasing taxes at a time where the economic outlook is bleak, at a time that we haven't got any kind of income tax relief in a really long time, at a time now that prices of other products have begun to inch up. There has to be a line where we draw and say enough is enough for the salaried middle class. How much more will you squeeze out of us? And if you are taking all of this money, where is the accountability? You can take all the cess in the world that you want. You can take COVID cess, you can take agri cess, you can take road cess, infrastructure cess, whatever. What are you getting in return? Has your quality of life in the city or town that you live in improved in terms of water quality, in terms of electricity connections, in terms of road quality, in terms of government public health infrastructure, in terms of education that is available for your children? Has that improved for the amount of tax that you pay to this government? Think about it. And perhaps it is time that we start questioning and raising our voice. Otherwise, be prepared to shell out a lot more as governments get lazy and find only these simple, direct ways of getting money for their own expenditure. Thank you for joining us on this conversation.